The air in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was so thick it felt solid, as thick as the ego of Alexander Grant, the king of malls, the man who bought up city blocks with a stroke of a pen. He wasn't just a guest, he was the main event. Beside him, Sophia Reyes, the influencer who sold perfection in pixels, laughed extravagantly at every word he whispered in her ear, as if each one was pure gold. That kiss he planted on her? It wasn't love. It was territory. A silent message to everyone: she's mine, and I can have whoever I want. The lights bathed the room like liquid gold, musicians tuned violins, executives closed deals that would reshape the country. It was a night of absolute luxury, until Alexander's world froze. He turned his head and saw her, near the entrance leading to the illuminated gardens. Olivia, his ex-wife. But it wasn't just that. She was pregnant, and not a discreet, early trimester pregnancy. It was an impossible-to-ignore pregnancy, the kind of belly that cuts a man in half, the kind of presence that makes even the clink of glasses stop. Alexander felt his chest lock up. The whole room vanished for a moment, because Olivia was the last person he'd expect to see there. What Alexander didn't know is that the baby inside Olivia was his, and that night, before midnight, his world would crumble in a way that no amount of money could fix. You can leave your like and subscribe to the channel to help us send more stories. Thank you. Beside her, with his hand resting protectively at the small of her back, was Victor Lang. He wasn't just a rich man. He was the man. The CEO of a real estate fund whose power wasn't measured in square footage built, but in billions that moved markets. Victor was the quiet force that made men like Alexander seem noisy and desperate. The ballroom, once a stage for his success display, suddenly felt small, the ceiling low, the air thin. Alexander's world, built on contracts, concrete, and ambition without limits, tilted dangerously. The kiss on Sophia, seconds before, now tasted bitter, metallic. He pulled away from her so abruptly she nearly lost her balance, her rehearsed smile crumbling. "Alex, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice a hiss of irritation. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on Olivia. 8 months. It had been 8 months since he'd seen her, since the day she left their penthouse on the Upper East Side with a single suitcase and a dignity he never knew she had. He was sure she'd come crawling back. It was just a matter of time. But she vanished. And now there she was. Olivia wore a navy silk dress, simple cut, that didn't try to hide the prominent curve of her belly. It accentuated it, celebrated it. Her hair, which he always insisted she keep long and straight, was cut to shoulder length, a modern style that framed a face with an expression of calm he'd never seen in her. She laughed at something Victor said, a genuine light sound that cut through the ballroom's buzz and hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd never made her laugh like that. Her laughter with him was restrained, polite. This was a laugh of freedom. And there was Victor Lang. Where Alexander was a shark sniffing blood, Victor was the ocean itself. Vast, deep, with invisible currents that could drag anyone under. Victor's gaze on Olivia wasn't that of a predator, like Alexander's. It was a look of silent admiration, of respect, that seemed infinitely more intimate and dangerous. "Who is that?" Sophia's voice was a venomous hiss following his gaze. Her small, calculating eyes landed on Olivia. "Oh, it's her. Wow." A cruel smile curved her lips. "Looks like she didn't waste time, huh? And snagged a bigger fish, but pregnant? How tacky." The word tacky echoed inside Alexander's skull. The image of Olivia, his Olivia, pregnant and with another man, wasn't tacky. It was an affront, a silent declaration of war. It was a betrayal so fundamental he felt it physically, like an icy hand squeezing his heart. How dare she? How dare she move on, find happiness, build a family, after he'd discarded her? The baby. It had to be Victor's. The math didn't add up otherwise. The thought brought a taste of bile up his throat. He'd been the one to end it. He'd said she wasn't enough, that their marriage had become a bore. He'd chosen Sophia, the novelty, the superficial thrill. Olivia was supposed to be the tragic character in his story, the woman who'd never recover from losing him. "Alexander, people are staring," Sophia murmured, tugging at his suit jacket sleeve. "Fix your face." He ignored her. A cold, cutting rage began forming in his chest. The narrative was his. The legacy was his. She had no right to rewrite it. He watched Victor lean in and whisper something in Olivia's ear, making her smile even more. It was a scene of complicity, of intimacy, staged on the grand stage of his world, and to him, it was public humiliation. The night, which should have been the highlight of his week, the celebration of another deal closed, turned into a private hell. Every smile exchanged between Olivia and Victor was a needle piercing his inflated ego. Every time Victor's hand rested on her back, it was a reminder of his own failure, not as a husband, but as the controller of his universe. He'd underestimated Olivia so profoundly, it now seemed like stupidity. He'd seen her as an accessory to his life, a decorative piece in his penthouse, the perfect hostess for his business dinners. A predictable, safe woman who'd absorb his absences and infidelities with silent resignation. The woman he saw now, across the ballroom, was a stranger, a woman who didn't need him, who flourished without him. Worse, a woman who'd been chosen by a man he, Alexander, secretly envied and feared. Victor Lang didn't need society pages or young lovers to validate his power. His power was a fact, solidified over decades of smart decisions and an impeccable reputation. And there he was, devoting his attention to Olivia. His Olivia. Alexander felt a visceral need to act, to shatter that scene, to reassert his dominance. But for the first time in a long time, he felt paralyzed. What would he do? March over and confront her? In front of everyone? In front of Victor Lang? The image of himself making a scene, uncontrolled rage on his face, while Victor watched with that analytical calm, made him back down. It would be a defeat before the battle even started. He was a man of action, of control, and in that moment he had control over nothing. Just watched, powerless, as the script of his life was rewritten by someone else, right in front of him. Sophia kept talking beside him, an annoying buzz about the decor, about another woman's dress, about the quality of the champagne. He heard none of it. His mind was in a loop, replaying the image of Olivia, the haircut, the smile, the belly. The belly. That rounded shape was a symbol of everything he'd denied her, everything he'd said he didn't want. A family, kids. They were distractions, he'd say, anchors that would keep him from building his empire. And now, she was building that family with another. And not just anyone, with the king of the board where he was just an ambitious pawn. Alexander's ego didn't just implode, it was pulverized, and the ashes scattered through the grand ballroom, invisible to all but him. The night was just beginning, and he already knew it would be the longest of his life. Alexander's eyes couldn't tear away, and every detail of the scene across the ballroom reopened a wound he didn't even know existed. The image of Olivia, serene and accompanied, was a living contradiction of everything he'd assumed about her. In his mind, she was still the woman he'd left behind, a silent figure who moved through their Upper East Side penthouse like a ghost, ensuring his world ran perfectly while hers unraveled. Their marriage hadn't died all at once. It was a slow death by suffocation. He remembered the last years as a blur of business trips, meetings that stretched into the night, and the increasingly constant presence of Sophia, his then marketing director, a woman whose ambition mirrored his, but without any depth. Olivia tried. He saw that now with painful clarity. The romantic dinners he'd cancel for a last-minute call, the weekend getaways he'd postpone indefinitely, the conversations he'd cut short with a wave of his hand while scrolling market news on his phone. He no longer saw her as a partner, but as furniture, a constant and guaranteed element of his life that required no maintenance. Her invisibility became so complete that he stopped noticing her smile shrinking, the silence that settled when he came home, the light in her eyes fading gradually. He saw only what he wanted, an impeccable home life that gave him freedom to pursue his conquests outside. Sophia's arrival was just the final symptom of the disease. The nights that became more frequent, the scent of a different perfume on his suits, The text messages that made him smile in a way he hadn't smiled at Olivia in years. She saw it all. He knew that now. She saw and endured in a silence he mistook for weakness, but which was really the calm before the storm. That last weekend in the Hamptons was her desperate attempt, one final effort to save something already dead. He'd agreed to go more out of guilt than desire, a gesture to appease his own conscience. For one night, under the influence of wine and manufactured nostalgia, the facade of strangers sharing a home crumbled. They made love. It wasn't an act of passion, but of sad tenderness, a fleeting echo of the couple they'd once been. In that moment, in the dark room with the sound of the ocean in the background, Olivia allowed herself a small spark of hope. Maybe this was a turning point. A week later, the hope was brutally extinguished. She found the receipt in his office drawer, a diamond bracelet from a jeweler on Fifth Avenue, bought the day before their Hamptons trip. The bracelet wasn't for her. That same afternoon, a friend, with cruelty disguised as concern, sent her a screenshot from an online society column. The photo showed Alexander and Sophia laughing on a yacht in the Bahamas, her wrist adorned with the diamond bracelet. The caption mentioned a business trip that to Olivia he'd said was in DC. That was the end. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't confront him. Confrontation would require energy she no longer had, and it would give him the drama he might even expect. Instead, she acted with surgical precision. She packed a single suitcase with the clothes that mattered, her books and her laptop. She left behind the designer dresses, the jewelry, the life he'd built for her. On the cold marble of his nightstand, she left only her wedding ring. And then she was gone. 2 weeks later, in a small rented apartment in Chicago, the morning sickness started. The 2 blue lines on the drugstore test seemed like a cosmic joke, a cruel irony of fate. The one thing she'd wanted for years in a lonely marriage, a child to fill the void of that immense penthouse, was granted exactly when her marriage ceased to exist. Going back to New York, to the emotional hell that was Alexander's orbit, was out of the question. He'd see her as weak, desperate, using the pregnancy to trap him, and he didn't deserve to know, not the man who'd made her invisible. Chicago was her blank canvas. With the money she had from her grandparents' inheritance, which Alexander always considered insignificant, she enrolled in a business management course for architects and months later opened her own interior design studio, Harper Designs. It was small, but it was hers. Every project, every client, every brick of her new life was laid by her own hands. It was in one of those courses that she met Victor Lang. He wasn't a classmate, but a guest lecturer, a titan of the industry sharing his vision on the future of real estate markets. Unlike Alexander, who was loud and self-promotional, Victor was quiet, observant, his intelligence a powerful undercurrent. He saw potential in Olivia's business plan, but more importantly, he saw the spark in her, the passion for what she did, a light Alexander had spent years trying to dim. He became her mentor, reviewed her projects, introduced her to contacts, offered strategic advice with the same seriousness he ran his billion-dollar fund. Their friendship built on mutual respect and professionalism. Victor was a widower, his heart still quietly belonging to his late wife, and he treated Olivia with an almost paternal, protective affection. When her pregnancy became evident, he didn't ask invasive questions. He simply ramped up his support, connecting her to bigger clients, ensuring she attended events like that gala to build her network. His hand on her back wasn't a lover's touch. It was a gesture of solidarity, a silent shield against a world he knew could be cruel. Alexander's assumption that she'd jumped into another man's bed was so typical of him, so reductive. He saw women as conquests, trophies to display. The idea of a platonic, supportive friendship between a man and a woman was beyond his grasp. And that was the truth burning behind Olivia's calm. The baby, that precious life growing inside her, was unequivocally Alexander's, the fruit of that last, painful night in the Hamptons, and she'd rather die than let him know. He didn't deserve to be a father, not to her child. He'd see the child as another possession, an asset to control, or worse, a weapon to hurt her. And she'd protect her child, and the peace she'd built at any cost. The night at the Plaza Hotel dragged on like a fever. Alexander barely registered the drive back to the Upper East Side penthouse. Sophia's irritated monologue about the event, about the other women, about his unforgivable behavior. "You completely humiliated me, Alex, leaving me standing there like an idiot, and over her." He slammed the car door in the private garage, the sound echoing off the concrete. "Shut up, Sophia," he said, his voice dangerously low. She recoiled as if struck. "Don't talk to me like that." "I'll talk to you however I want," he snarled, striding toward the elevator. "You think this is about you. This was never about you." The words hung in the air, a truth so brutal and sudden it left her speechless. Inside the penthouse, a monument to his own ego with its cold marble floors and panoramic views, the silence was deafening. Sophia went straight to the bar and poured herself a generous shot of cognac. Alexander paced in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights a mocking reflection of his inner turmoil. Sleep was impossible. The image of Olivia, serene and pregnant, was etched on the inside of his eyelids. Victor Lang's calm, authoritative voice echoed in his mind. The obsession took root the next morning. He ignored his meeting schedule and made a single call to a man named Marcus Hale, a former NYPD detective who now ran a private investigations agency. Alexander's voice was sharp, devoid of any pleasantries. "I want everything you can find on Olivia Harper and Victor Lang. Schedules, social circles, finances. I want to know where they eat, who they talk to, and especially when they started seeing each other. I need a timeline, Marcus. Detailed." On the other end, Hale's voice was pragmatic. "Understood, Mr. Grant. This related to the divorce settlement?" "This is about my personal business," Alexander snapped. "Just do it." The following days were a descent into a paranoid hell of his own making. He was distracted at work, curt with his executives, his mind constantly drifting back to Olivia. He imagined her with Victor in whatever apartment she had in Chicago. Were they decorating a nursery, picking names? The domestic images were a particular torture, fueling a fury he couldn't control. Sophia tried to bridge the chasm that had opened between them, alternating between seductive overtures and tearful accusations, but Alexander now saw her with painful clarity. She was an echo of his worst traits, materialistic, self-centered, obsessed with status. The thrill of the conquest was gone, replaced by weary irritation. He saw the way she eyed his watch, his car, the penthouse. She hadn't fallen for him. She'd executed a merger with his bank account. Hale's first report arrived a week later in a thick manila envelope that seemed too heavy for its contents. Alexander tore it open, hands impatient. Inside were photos. Olivia leaving a charming building in Chicago's Gold Coast. Her building. Olivia in a client meeting, her portfolio open on the table. Harper Designs was real. Small but thriving, with a growing list of high-end clients. Then he saw the photos of her with Victor. They weren't what he expected. No candlelit romantic dinners, no stolen kisses or weekend getaways. There were shots of them at a business lunch, one of Victor visiting a construction site for one of her projects. An image of them leaving a commercial building that housed a well-known medical lab. In every photo, Victor looked more like a concerned mentor than a passionate partner. There was a respectful distance between them in each frame. It didn't make sense. Hale's notes were even more baffling. Relationship appears platonic professional. Lang is a known backer of emerging talent in the industry, supported 2 other startups similarly in the last year. No evidence of romantic involvement. Alexander hurled the file across the desk, scattering papers. Platonic? Impossible. A man like Victor Lang didn't keep a platonic relationship with a woman like Olivia. There had to be more. Hale was missing something. Then he saw the last sheet. It was the timeline. It listed the date Olivia enrolled in the management course, the date she registered her company, and the date of her first doctor's appointment, obtained illegally through a contact at the health plan. Alexander's eyes scanned the dates. His blood ran cold. He pulled out his agenda from the previous year, hands trembling slightly as he flipped through the pages. He found the weekend. The Hamptons. He did the math. Once, twice, 3 times. The dates lined up. The gala, the apparent stage of her pregnancy, It all fit with that last weekend. The baby wasn't Victor Lang's. The realization didn't hit him with a wave of relief, but with a tsunami of pure, possessive fury. She'd lied. She'd gotten pregnant with his child and run, planning to raise it with another man, letting the world believe it was Victor's. She was trying to steal his legacy, his heir. He grabbed his phone, thumb hovering over his lawyer's number. This changed everything. She'd deceived him, defrauded him. He wasn't just a humiliated ex-husband anymore. He was a father, and he'd burn her whole world to the ground to claim what was his. The letter arrived via process server on a Tuesday morning. It came from the most feared law firm in New York, known for its scorched earth tactics. Olivia's hands shook as she tore open the thick envelope. Her lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Brooke, had warned her this might happen. The language was brutal, clinical, designed to terrify. It accused her of maternal fraud and intentional concealment of paternity, demanded she submit to a court-supervised paternity test immediately. But it was the final paragraph that stole her breath. Should it be proven that the child is the descendant of Mr. Grant, he will immediately file for sole legal and physical custody on the grounds that Ms. Harper has demonstrated profound character deviation and emotional instability by hiding the pregnancy and attempting to attribute paternity to a third party, thus proving herself an unfit mother. Unfit mother. The words danced before her eyes. He was going to take her baby. She sank into a chair at her dining table, the letter fluttering from her fingers. This was his move. Not an appeal from a heartbroken man, not a confused plea for the truth, but a declaration of war. He hadn't contacted her personally. He'd mobilized his army of lawyers. He wasn't trying to be a father, he was trying to win. Panic, cold and sharp, gripped her. She could see the court battle in her mind. Alexander, powerful and impeccable in a tailored suit, his lawyers painting her as a manipulative gold digger. Her friendship with Victor would be twisted into something sordid. Her decision to build a life on her own would be portrayed as a vengeful plot to steal his child. They'd tear her apart in court. She called Brooke, her voice a choked whisper. "I got it. It's worse than we thought." "Stay calm, Olivia." Brooke's voice on the other end was a steady anchor in the storm brewing inside her. "I'm reading my copy now. This is classic Alexander Grant. Full aggression, maximum intimidation. He's trying to scare you into folding before the fight even starts. He's accusing me of being an unfit mother, Brooke. He's going to take my baby." The sentence came out as a sob, fear materializing into words. "No, he won't," Brooke said with unshakable firmness. "He has no grounds. Hiding a pregnancy from an ex-husband who was actively cheating isn't reason to lose custody. A sensible judge will see this for what it is, bullying. But we need to be smart, very smart." Later that day, she met Victor in a private room at the club he frequented. She'd explained the situation over the phone, and he'd insisted they meet right away. She pushed the letter across the polished mahogany table. He read it, his expression unreadable, but his jaw clenching almost imperceptibly. "This is his play," Olivia said, her voice hollow. "To punish me for leaving him, for being happy." Victor folded the letter neatly and placed it back on the table. "No, Olivia, this isn't just about punishment. It's about possession. He lost a valuable asset, you. Now he's discovered there's an even more valuable one he didn't know he had. A child, an heir. He sees your son or daughter as an extension of his legacy. This isn't about love, it's about acquisition." His cold, strategic analysis was terrifyingly accurate. It stripped the situation of all emotion and left only the chilling mechanics of Alexander's mind. "What do I do?" she whispered. "If I fight, he'll drag us through the mud. He'll drag you through the mud. He'll ruin my business." Victor met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "My reputation can withstand the bluster of a man like Alexander Grant, and your business is strong because you're talented. He can't take that from you. What he expects is your fear. He expects you to shrink, to negotiate, to give him control. You can't do that. So I fight." "You don't just fight," Victor said, a new hardness in his voice. "You dictate the terms of the battle. You're not the defendant here, Olivia. You're the mother of his child." That gives you power he's completely underestimated. Stop reacting to his aggression and launch your own offensive." The words ignited something inside her. The fear that had paralyzed her began to recede, replaced by a slow burning anger. Victor was right. She'd been so focused on protecting herself that she hadn't seen the strength of her own position. She and Brooke worked late into the night, crafting the response. It was a masterpiece of controlled strength. Their letter didn't deny paternity. It embraced it. The letter agreed to the DNA test, but on her terms, at a lab and time of her choosing. It stated that Olivia had every intention of listing Alexander as the father on the birth certificate. And then came the counter-offensive. It detailed a proposed parenting plan that granted Alexander supervised visitation rights, conditioned on completing a comprehensive anger management course and co-parenting therapy. It included a request for child support, calculated at the highest legal tier based on his reported income, with a stipulation that a multi-million-dollar trust fund be established for the child's education and future, managed by an independent third party. It was a brilliant move. It reframed her not as a woman hiding a secret, but as a responsible mother proactively planning for her child's future and safety. It painted Alexander not as a victim, but as a man with anger issues who needed professional help before he could be trusted with a child. Sending that letter was like pulling the pin on a grenade. There was no going back. The quiet, peaceful life she'd built was over. The war had begun. The response from Olivia's lawyer hit Alexander's desk like a physical blow. He'd expected hysteria, denials, or a terrified plea for settlement. He hadn't expected this. This calm, calculated, strategic assault. He read it 3 times, the words blurring with rage. Supervised visitation, anger management, therapy. She was positioning him as a dangerous, unstable monster, and the support figures, the trust demand. It was audacious. She wasn't just acknowledging the child was his, she was sending him the bill wrapped in a court-ordered straitjacket. "She's using the baby to extort me," he roared at his lawyer, a slick man named Felix, over the phone. "This is robbery." "Actually, Alexander, it's a perfectly crafted legal position," Felix said, his voice dry. "She's not hiding. She's meeting you on the battlefield and setting the rules of engagement. Her requests are, on the surface, entirely reasonable and child-focused. A judge will love it." Alexander slammed the phone down. He felt a profound loss of control, a sensation he despised more than anything. The call came the next day, not from Olivia's lawyer, but from Victor Lang's executive assistant. The request was simple. Mr. Lang invited Mr. Grant to a meeting at his office the following morning. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. Alexander's pride screamed to refuse, but a deeper instinct, the instinct of a predator recognizing a greater one, told him he had to go. The offices of Lang Capital were the antithesis of his own. Where Alexander's were modern, flashy, and ostentatious, Victor's were classic, understated, and radiated a power so deep it didn't need to announce itself. Dark wood bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound books, not just business texts, but history, philosophy, and art. Victor stood by the window, looking out at the bustle of Chicago's Loop. He didn't turn when Alexander entered. "Thank you for coming, Grant," he said, his voice even. He gestured to a chair. "Please." Alexander stayed standing. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Lang. What do you want?" Victor finally turned, his grey eyes pinning Alexander in place. "I want to offer you perspective. You're about to make a catastrophic mistake, and since it involves Olivia, I'm taking the unusual step of intervening. Olivia is none of your business. This is between me and the mother of my child. Anything concerning Olivia is my business," Victor corrected gently. "Because she's my friend, and because I'm not going to stand by and watch you terrorize a pregnant woman in some misguided attempt to soothe your bruised ego." Alexander bristled. "This is about my rights as a father." Victor walked to his desk but didn't sit. He leaned against it, a casual pose that was somehow more imposing than sitting behind it. "Let me tell you what this is about. You lost control of your wife, so you discarded her. Now you've discovered she walked away with something you consider a valuable asset, and you want it back. You plan to use the courts to bully her, to bleed her emotionally and financially until she breaks and gives you what you want. It's the same tactic you use in your hostile takeovers. It's predictable and it won't work here. He paused, letting the words sink in. You see, you think power is shouting, threatening, and demolishing. But that's not real power. It's just noise. He picked up a single sheet of paper from his desk. This is the preliminary financial prospectus for your new project, the Apex Tower. A very ambitious venture. Your lead investor is the Midwest Pension Fund, correct? Alexander's blood ran cold. How did you get that? I have a seat on their board, Victor said, as if commenting on the weather. A fact your due diligence team somehow overlooked. I also sit on the boards of 2 of your other major lenders. They listen to my counsel. They value my perspective. He let the threat hang in the air, unspoken but crystal clear. He could kill the Apex Tower with a single call. He could decimate Alexander's empire. You see, Alexander, Victor continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Real power isn't being the loudest. It's being the one everyone in the room listens to when you finally choose to speak. And I'm telling them, and you, that any man who would subject the mother of his unborn child to a vicious custody battle out of pure spite is not a man with sound judgment. He's a risk, a bad investment. Alexander was speechless. He was being dismantled piece by piece with chilling precision. What do you want, Lang? He finally managed. What I want is for you to stop. You'll drop this ridiculous sole custody suit. You'll accept Olivia's proposal for therapy and anger management. You'll pay the support she deserves, and you'll start treating her with the respect she merits. You have a choice, Grant. You can be a father, a difficult, messy, but rewarding role, or you can be a litigant. And if you choose to be a litigant, I'll personally ensure you have nothing left to fight for. Your tower will be a hole in the ground, and your name will be a cautionary tale. He placed the prospectus back on his desk. The choice is yours. Now leave my office. Alexander left that building a changed man. He'd been stripped bare, his power revealed as the fragile, hollow thing it was. He'd mistaken wealth for strength and arrogance for authority. Victor Lang had just given him a masterclass in the difference. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about winning. He was thinking about surrender. The days following the meeting with Victor Lang were a silent reckoning. Alexander barricaded himself in his penthouse, curtains drawn, phone unanswered. He cancelled his meetings, ignored his lawyer's frantic calls. The empire he'd built felt like a prison of his own design. Victor's words echoed in his head. A gift you did nothing to deserve. He thought about Olivia, not the powerful, defiant woman at the gala, but the woman he'd married. The woman who used to leave notes in his briefcase, who remembered his father's birthday when he forgot, who tried for years to bridge the growing chasm between them while he was busy laying foundations for his next skyscraper. He'd called her weak, complacent, unambitious. He saw now that her strength was a quiet, resilient one he'd been too blind and arrogant to recognize. Her ambition wasn't absent. Her ambition had simply been for them, for a life he'd actively sabotaged. The rage that had fueled him for months was gone, spent, leaving behind a cold, heavy ash of shame. He looked at his reflection in the dark glass of the window, a defeated, lonely man in a vast, empty room. Sophia was right. He didn't want a baby. He just wanted to punish Olivia for proving she could survive without him. Worse, that she could thrive. He finally called Felix Schmidt. Drop the custody suit, he said, his voice flat. Alexander, what are you talking about? We have her on the ropes. No, we don't, Alexander said, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Drop it all and draft an agreement accepting every term from Ms. Harper. The therapy, the supervised visits, the trust fund, everything. No negotiations. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Are you sure, Alexander? I've never been sure of anything in my life, he said, and hung up. The first step was surrender. The next was atonement. He knew he couldn't just sign a piece of paper. He had to face her. He drove to her building in the Gold Coast without an appointment, without a plan. He just knew he had to go. Parked across the street and sat for a long time, watching the warm light spilling from her windows. He saw her silhouette pass by, and the sight of her safe in the world she'd built for herself caused a pang in his chest so sharp it felt like grief. Finally, he got out of the car and walked to her door. rang the bell, heart hammering against his ribs. Olivia opened the door, the chain still latched. When she saw him, her face paled. The warmth in her expression vanished, replaced by wary, tired apprehension. "What are you doing here, Alexander?" "Can I come in?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Please, just for 5 minutes. I'm not here to fight." She hesitated, her eyes searching his for any sign of the old anger. She saw only exhaustion. After a long moment, she unlatched the chain and opened the door. Her apartment was beautiful, full of color, art, and life. It was everything their cold, minimalist penthouse wasn't. It was her. She didn't offer him a seat, just stood near the door, arms crossed over her belly. "What do you want?" He didn't know where to start. "I'm sorry," seemed impossibly small. "I dropped the suit," he said instead. "Told my lawyer to accept all your terms." She raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Why?" "Because he was right," Alexander murmured, looking at the floor. "Lang, he showed me what I was doing, what I was becoming." He finally met her eyes, and she saw something she hadn't seen in a decade. Vulnerability. "This was never about being a father, Olivia. It was about punishing you for being strong enough to leave me, for being happy without me. It was about my ego. It was monstrous. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you." Tears welled in his eyes, hot and shameful. He didn't try to hide them. "I don't deserve to be this child's father. I know that. I destroyed our life, our marriage, everything. But I'm asking you, not for a second chance with you, but for a chance someday to be a father to our baby. I'll do whatever you ask. Therapy, classes, anything. I'll earn it if you'll let me." Olivia listened, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick with years of unspoken resentments and shared history. She'd prepared for a fight, for more threats, for more pain. She hadn't prepared for this, a broken man offering genuine, unconditional surrender. "Why should I believe you, Alexander?" she asked softly. "This could just be another tactic." "Because I have nothing left to gain," he said, voice cracking. "I've already lost everything. My company's on the brink because of my obsession with this. Sophia's gone. I'm alone in that mausoleum of an apartment we used to call home. This isn't a tactic. This is rock bottom." She saw the truth in his eyes, the raw, unvarnished agony of a man finally forced to see himself as he truly was. "The first step," she said, her voice steady, "is you getting help, real help. Not just because I'm telling you, but because you know you need it. The second step is leaving me alone to have this baby in peace. We'll communicate through our lawyers about the birth plan. Everything else we'll see. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't absolution, but it was a door cracked open, just a sliver." "Okay," he whispered, nodding. "Okay. Thank you, Olivia." He turned and left, without looking back. Olivia closed the door and leaned against it, a single tear tracing down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or even pity. It was a tear of release. The war was over. And for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that her child might one day have a father worth knowing. Alexander was true to his word. He vanished from Olivia's life as suddenly as he'd reappeared. The legal agreements were signed without fanfare. The trust fund for the baby was established, its value far exceeding what Olivia's lawyer had requested. All communication came through proper channels, formal and respectful. But behind the scenes, Alexander Grant was dismantling his own life and trying to build a new one. He started therapy with a respected psychiatrist in Chicago. The first sessions were brutal, forcing him to confront a lifetime of defining his worth by his net worth, of seeing people as assets or liabilities. He learned his need for control stemmed from a deep fear of abandonment, a fear he'd ironically brought to life by pushing away the one person who'd truly loved him. He put the penthouse up for sale. Living there was like inhabiting a museum of his failures. He moved to a smaller, more modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a space that felt empty but clean, a blank slate. Sold his flashy sports car, replacing it with a sensible sedan. Began shedding the trappings of the man he'd been, hoping to find someone better underneath. His business required a different kind of repair. He called an emergency meeting with his board and key investors, including a rep from the Midwest Pension Fund. He made no excuses. "I've been negligent in my duties as CEO," he told the stunned room. "My personal life interfered with my professional judgment, and I put this company at risk. It was inexcusable." He presented a new, more conservative plan for the Apex Tower, with revised funding and a realistic timeline. Answered every question with a humility no one had ever seen from him before. He was fighting not just for his project, but for his credibility. Slowly, meticulously, he began regaining their trust. He read books on fatherhood, on child development, on emotional intelligence, on healthy co-parenting, filled notebooks with his thoughts, with questions for his therapist, with letters to his unborn child he knew he might never send. He was studying to be a parent, with the same intensity he'd once applied to studying a stock portfolio. Olivia, meanwhile, flourished in the peace he'd finally given her. Her company, Harper Designs, landed a major contract to design a boutique hotel in Miami. Her name was becoming synonymous with warm, sophisticated, life-filled spaces. She prepared for the baby's arrival, turning a spare room in her apartment into a lovely nursery full of soft light and gentle colors. Victor remained a constant friend, checking in, taking her to lunch, celebrating her successes. He never spoke of his meeting with Alexander, but Olivia knew he was the architect of her peace, and she was eternally grateful. Her life was full. She had friends, a career she loved, and the eager anticipation of motherhood. She rarely thought of Alexander, and when she did, it was with distant, detached curiosity. She wondered if his apology was real, if his changes were lasting, but she didn't allow herself to rely on it. She was building a future for herself and her baby that didn't require a reformed Alexander Grant to be complete. She was in her last month of pregnancy, overseeing the installation of a custom wood panel in the lobby of the Miami hotel when the first contraction hit. It was sharp and sudden, stealing her breath. Her project manager, a young architect named Lucas, took one look at her face and immediately called a car. As she was rushed to the airport to catch the first flight back to Chicago, hand resting on her belly, she made a decision. She called her lawyer. "Brooke," she said, breathing through another wave of pain. "Call Alexander's lawyer. Tell him. Say the baby's coming." It wasn't a request for his presence. It was simply a statement of fact. He was the father. He had a right to know. What he did with that information would be the first real test of the man he claimed to be trying to become. The call reached Alexander during a therapy session. His phone buzzed on the table, and he instinctively moved to silence it, but his lawyer's name flashed on the screen. He answered, heart leaping to his throat. "She's in labor," Felix said, his voice oddly gentle. "St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago." Alexander's mind went blank. This was it. The theoretical, abstract baby he'd been preparing for was about to become a real, breathing person. Fear, raw and potent, flooded him. He wasn't ready. He'd never be ready. "What do I do?" he asked his therapist, Dr. Nolan, after hanging up. His voice was a panicked whisper. Dr. Nolan looked at him calmly. "What would the man you want to be do, Alexander?" He thought for a moment. The old Alexander would have stormed the hospital, demanding access, asserting his rights, making a scene. The new Alexander, the man he was painfully trying to build, knew this moment wasn't about him. It was about Olivia. It was about the baby. He drove to the hospital, hands shaking on the wheel. He didn't go to the maternity ward. He went to the main lobby, found an uncomfortable chair in a forgotten corner and waited. He texted his lawyer. "Tell Brooke I'm here in the lobby. I won't go up unless invited. My only concern is Olivia and the baby's health." The hours ticked by. He drank stale coffee from a vending machine and watched families come and go. He felt invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of the most important event in his life. Every newborn cry he heard from a passing elevator sent a jolt through him. He was terrified. He was hopeful. He was utterly powerless. And for the first time, he was okay with that. Late into the night, a nurse approached him. "Mr. Grant?" He jumped to his feet. "Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" "Mother and son are doing great," the nurse said with a warm smile. "Ms. Harper is resting. She said you could come up for a few minutes if you'd like." His son. A boy. Relief hit him so hard, his knees felt weak. He followed the nurse to the maternity ward. The hallway was quiet, soft. She pointed to a room at the end of the hall. He stood outside the door for a full minute, taking deep breaths, trying to compose himself. Knocked softly. "Come in," Olivia's voice, tired but steady, called. He pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit. Olivia was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but beautiful. In her arms, swaddled in a light blue blanket, was the tiniest human he'd ever seen. She looked at him, her eyes searching his. There was no anger, no fear, just a deep, profound weariness. "Alexander," she said softly. He couldn't speak, just walked slowly toward the bed, eyes fixed on the little bundle. The boy had a tuft of dark hair just like his. "His name is Theo," Olivia whispered. "I was waiting to meet him." He stood beside the bed at a respectful distance, hands clenched at his sides. He didn't know the protocol, didn't know what he was allowed to do. Olivia saw the conflict in his eyes. After a moment, she made a small gesture. Would you like to hold him?" Tears sprang to his eyes as he nodded, unable to form words. He sat carefully on the edge of the chair by the bed. Olivia showed him how to position his arms, and then, with infinite care, she transferred their son into his embrace. The baby was so light, so fragile. He smelled of milk and innocence. His tiny fingers closed around his thumb. In that moment, the last remnants of the old Alexander Grant, the titan, the shark, the king, crumbled and vanished. He was just a man holding his son, overwhelmed by a love so fierce and protective, it physically hurt. He looked at Olivia, eyes swimming with tears. "Thank you," he choked out. It was all he could say. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for this chance." "He needs a father, Alexander," Olivia said gently. "I hope you can be one." It wasn't a promise of a future together. Their marriage was over, a story they couldn't rewrite. But this was a new beginning, a chance to build something different, a family redefined by forgiveness, bound by unconditional love for the boy now sleeping in his arms. In the end, Olivia Harper didn't need a powerful man to save her. She'd saved herself. Her victory wasn't reclaiming Alexander, but building a life so full and beautiful that his presence was no longer a requirement for her happiness. She found strength in her independence, joy in her work, and deep purpose in motherhood. Alexander Grant, humbled and transformed, began the long, quiet journey of earning his son's love, one day at a time. Their story didn't become one of a romance undone, but of a resilient family, proving that the most fulfilling second chances aren't about reclaiming the past, but bravely building a new future. And hey, what did you think? On a scale of 0 to 10, what score would you give it? Leave your comments saying which city you're watching from and subscribe to catch our next stories. Thanks so much for joining, and see you next time.